I'm Martha McCallum.
I'm Bill Hemmer.
I'm Shannon Bream, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Wednesday, April 28th, 2021. I'm Jessica Rosenthal. The president will address a joint session of Congress tonight, just ahead of his 100th day in office. And while he's receiving high praise from Democrats, Republicans feel left out.
Biden, with all of his rhetoric of unity and bipartisanship, has not really demonstrated that.
I'm Dave Anthony. In the Biden address to the nation tonight, he might bring up his COVID response first.
This president has taken action on the major issue confronting America in his first 100 days in.
And I'm Jason Chaffetz. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
It's not a State of the Union speech. Presidents don't do those often in their first year after having given an inauguration speech. But tonight, President Biden will address Congress just ahead of his 100th day in office. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said Tuesday the main highlight will be introducing the American Families Plan, which will focus on what she called historic investment in education and childcare.
He will also use the speech as an opportunity to talk about many of his other priorities, including police reform, immigration, gun safety, his ongoing work to get the pandemic under control, and to putting Americans back to work.
In these first 100 days, President Biden has done quite a bit, signing dozens of executive orders, memos, and proclamations, many of them reversals of President Trump's policies.
With the first action today, we're going to work to undo the moral and national shame of the previous administration that literally, not figuratively, ripped children from the arms of their families, their mothers and fathers at the border.
He also reversed Remain in Mexico and paused wall construction. And since he took office, there's been an unprecedented wave of Central American migrants arriving at the border. He rejoined the Paris Climate Accord and the World Health Organization. He's directed the Justice Department to look at ways to ban ghost guns and announced that troops will be withdrawn from Afghanistan on September 11th of this year. Just this week, he signed an order making the minimum wage $15 an hour for federal contract workers, and he's revoked the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. And while he's receiving high praise from Democrats, not so from the GOP.
I'm going to act, and I'm going to act fast. I'd like to be doing it with the support of Republicans. I've met with Republicans. There's some really fine people who want to get something done, but they're just not willing to go as far as I think we have to go.
It is just too far in many respects for many Republicans.
Well, I was at the inauguration. It was all about unity, bringing the country together, that we were too divided. And I have to tell you, everything I've seen has been extremely partisan in this first 100 days.
Michael McCaul is a congressman representing the 10th District of Texas.
Including, the executive orders that you're talking about, the Keystone Pipeline right out of the box, hurting my state and energy state, the welders, the blue-collar workers that are really relying on that. And then I think the biggest mistake I've seen, and I've dealt with the border my entire professional career as a federal prosecutor, chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, now leader of the Foreign Affairs Committee, is reversing, these asylum cooperation agreements and Remain in Mexico policy, which has really created a humanitarian crisis on the border. And I've been down there many times, and Jessica, I've never seen it this bad.
Congressman, as Central Americans arrive by the thousands to our border, we know in March nearly 19,000 kids alone were apprehended in that month. I imagine you think he should talk about the border tonight, but do you think he will say anything different than what he said at his first press conference as president about the border?
I would hope he would. I'm not even sure if he'll even bring it up. I mean, the reason they don't even want to go down there is because they know the optics are so bad. They know it's a humanitarian crisis, and Mayorkas knows better than the Secretary of Homeland Security. I just don't think they want the optics. And certainly, if it's brought up at all, I'm sure it's not going to be the driving theme of the joint session speech. They know this is where the president's polling the lowest on this issue more than any other issue out there. And so I personally don't think he's going to spend a lot of time on it. And he should, because I think it is a crisis.
You, as you noted, you formerly chaired the Homeland Security Committee, and before becoming a member of Congress, you were chief of counterterrorism and national security at the U.S. Attorney's Office in West Texas. Where do you hope the Biden administration focuses when it comes to foreign policy? We've seen plans about withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, renewed talks on the Iran deal, and in every speech I think I've heard the president give thus far, he talks about China and this sort of fierce competition we're now in and have been in. How do you feel about the focus thus far when it comes to foreign policy and where it needs to go?
Well, he's engaging with our allies, and I agree with that. I worry about Afghanistan being, look, it's gone on for a long time. My biggest concern is how can we identify threats in country and respond to those threats to the homeland. I predict that when we withdraw in September, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda are probably going to overrun and take over that country. And my biggest concern is how can we, respond to threats in real time, that could impact our allies or the homeland itself, going back to pre-9/11 state. I worry about Iran, too, because they are getting closer to a bomb. They seem so eager to get involved in this and back into the JCPOA, just like John Kerry. I think wanted just a deal, not a good deal, as Netanyahu would talk about. Right now Iran's getting very close to their 60% enrichment. Within months could be at 90%. They have short-range missiles, and Israel and the Saudi Peninsula are really in the crosshairs here.
Congressman, they are at 60% already? I mean, I remember hearing, and I think it was an Iranian official saying that we're not going to be bullied. If we want to get to 60%, we will. But you're saying that they already have reached that point?
Well, the Ayatollah has announced that they're at 60%. Now, whether how verifiable that is, there are assessments that it could be lower than that. But we do know that they are moving, with remarkable speed right now in their enrichment process. And if they are getting close to 60, as the Ayatollah says, you're talking about a 4-month breakout to get to 90%, and then about a year time to develop a nuclear warhead to attach to these short-range missiles. So if we can negotiate, and look, I want the diplomats to succeed. We don't want them to fail because we don't want to go to war. One thing Iran has to understand very clearly is that the United States of America, and I think I speak for the Democrats on this one as well, are not going to sit back idly and allow a nuclear Iran to exist. In one way or another, America will respond to that.
Speaking of John Kerry, some are calling for John Kerry to resign. He's currently serving as a climate envoy under the Biden administration over leaked audio of Iran's foreign minister saying that Kerry, as Secretary of State, told him, Javad Zarif, that Israel carried out strikes against Syrian targets. Kerry's adamantly denying that this is true, but I wonder what you think of these allegations in light of the fact that Secretary Pompeo in 2018 called Kerry's private meetings with Zarif at the time, unseemly and unprecedented, and Kerry himself at the time admitted in a radio show in 2018 that he had met with Zarif 3 or 4 times.
Well, I find these allegations very disturbing. We will be looking into these allegations. I think there should be an investigation. I think Mr. Kerry needs to come out more strongly in his defense on this. I think, I signed a document that requires me to, when I get briefed on classified information, I certainly don't give it to my foreign adversary. That is a huge violation of law. Which were true, should be prosecuted. But I think we need all the facts, in front of us. I don't know if we have all. But the one thing, Jessica, that does bother me, to your point about what Pompeo says, why is he maintaining this relationship, with a former, foreign minister of Iran, not exactly an ally of the United States? It's one thing like, Great Britain or France, but to carry on a relationship and maintain a relationship with the foreign minister of a major adversary.
He said in his own defense, look, I shared all the information that I got with Pompeo. I shared that information, that I gleaned from my conversations with Zarif, with the State Department at the time. Does that absolve him of anything here?
It just depends if it was classified information revealed at that time.
Right.
Under the law. And he was a federal prosecutor for many years. And I take that oath very seriously.
Just to bring this back to Biden's speech tonight, the latest Fox News poll found 62% of people polled do not support defunding the police, but 33% do. And White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said Tuesday that the president will talk about police. I'm just wondering, everybody's sort of focusing on that 62% that does not support defunding the police as being sort of a overwhelming a number of Americans, but still 33% do support it. Yeah. What do you make of that number?
Well, I think it's the whole George Floyd thing. I'm glad that Senator Tim Scott's going to give the response to President Biden's speech and talk about race relations, but also talk about the Justice Act. Once again, another bipartisan opportunity the president squandered that we could have passed, within a week or two after George Floyd's murder, and that was squandered. And we had a great bipartisan opportunity. And I look, that was a terrible case, but does it merit de Blasio defunding the New York Police Department by $1 billion, which I've been very close to them? My Austin Police Department, my city council defunded the Austin Police by $150 million for something they had nothing to do with. So I think we got to put it all in perspective as well. You have a hard time recruiting people in the police force, with that sort of defunding. And I think for the most part, people don't like this because it makes them feel less safe.
Finally, as you've probably heard at this point, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says she's very happy with President Biden thus far, that he has exceeded expectations. What do you make of some folks in the Democratic Party who maybe are on the further left end of the Democratic Party who, maybe had their reservations or skepticisms about this president governing from the middle or being more centrist, being quite pleased with him thus far?
Well, that signals to me that they are prevailing in the policies, which I find, to me, that's very concerning. And Biden, with all of his rhetoric of unity and bipartisanship, has not really demonstrated that. And what that signals to me is that wing of the party is winning, and that their policies, are prevailing. And to me, that's the wrong direction for the country. I don't think that's where most Americans are.
Congressman McCaul, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thanks, Jessica. I appreciate it. I'd love to come back on again.
This is Jason Chaffetz with your Fox News commentary coming up.
When President Biden talks to us tonight, he might bring up COVID first.
I urge all Americans, don't let up now.
That was yesterday when the president announced new mask guidelines. Many of us don't need to wear them outside anymore.
The odds of getting or giving the virus to others is very, very low if you're both been fully vaccinated and out in the open air.
Unless you're in a big crowd, then keep the mask on. Same thing if you haven't gotten a shot yet.
This is another great reason to go get vaccinated now.
A message he might repeat tonight.
This president has taken action on the major issue confronting America in his first 100 days. And
Juan Williams is a Fox political analyst and co-host of The Five on the Fox News Channel.
I would imagine he would go on to talk about economic issues and the fact that they passed a COVID relief bill that delivered checks to 160 million people who had lost jobs or seen their incomes diminished as a result of the pandemic, and people in various states of lockdown and, things like restaurants closed. Help to small business owners, speaking of those small restaurants, help to small businesses. And he will make the case that he is on his way now and in good position politically to pass something of an infrastructure bill that could even do more to get our economy going.
Yeah, this is where we're going next. There are two big things he's going to talk about, and then they all have the American name. The American Rescue Plan was the one with COVID relief, the American Jobs, which is the infrastructure plan, and the American Families Plan, which I guess he's going to speak a lot about tonight. That's also going to be on the agenda. So the price tag on these, Juan, are around $4 trillion for the two new ones, and there was also nearly $2 trillion on the one that was already passed. We're talking like $6 trillion. That's a lot of money.
It is. And here's the interesting part. So this discussion in Washington is very freighted. And by that I mean you see Republican politicians, because Republican voters, by and large, supported the relief package, as you called it, Dave, that gave the stimulus checks to people, that sent out so much help in terms of getting a lot of the schools reopened and all that. But they also like elements of what Biden is proposing in terms of infrastructure, especially if you limit the definition to roads, bridges, tunnels, things like that.
Right. But the definition's not limited in the Biden proposal to that.
Bill.
No.
Correct. You're right. It's not limited in the Biden proposal, and the Families Plan that you also referenced would take it even longer along the way in terms of saying we're looking at things like medical help for people who have health issues, or we're looking at child care. So there's a lot going on here. But my point to you, Dave, is this. Republicans on Capitol Hill, having opposed the COVID relief plan, have found themselves out of step and are now showing some inkling of trying to say, you know what, we are willing to go along with something in terms of infrastructure, particularly if you limit it, unlike what the Biden bill is now, but limit it to specifically hard concrete projects, roads, bridges, tunnels. And part of that equation is also then how you pay for it. And again, Republicans find themselves out of step because they're saying, don't raise taxes on people who make more than $400,000, the Biden proposal, and don't raise your corporate tax rates, again, part of the Biden proposal. They're saying that would somehow limit business economic growth in the country. So we're looking now at the idea that maybe there could be some negotiations. Biden says he's open to it. I want to just make one final note on this point, that Republican voters so far are open to the idea of additional taxes on the rich and on the corporations. And in fact, in the last Fox News poll, what we see is overall the American people are very strongly in favor of raising taxes on people making more than the $400,000 and on corporations.
Tomorrow marks President Biden's 100th day in office, and many on the left give him a good grade, including AOC Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Definitely exceeded expectations that progressives had. I'll be frank, I think a lot of us expected a much more conservative administration.
Republicans say he's taking us down a road towards socialism.
You would be a fool to not think that when people put out big lies that somehow they resonate. I mean, at the moment, the big one is Biden wants to take away your hamburger. I mean, everybody says that's not true. We know it's not true, but it's all over the Internet and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So when you ask me about this socialism charge, I think to myself, socialism? Joe Biden, he's been around so long. We all know him. People think of him as a political moderate, but a socialist? Are you telling me that the people in the United States Congress who are the Democratic leaders, people like Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, are suddenly socialists? What about Joe Manchin, who is a Democrat from West Virginia and holds such sway over the Democratic vote, the ability of Democrats in an evenly divided Senate to do anything? He's no socialist. Now, AOC, some people would say, oh, she's got to be a socialist in your mind, Juan. But, Dave, I would say to you, AOC is in New York City. She is pursuing an agenda that has allowed her to gain re-election, and I think she gives voice to some far-left ideas. But to talk about, like, state ownership of our industries, to talk about the state dictating our paychecks, I think that's pretty strong. But that's what socialism is. Maybe people are just talking about something more vague. But at the moment, it seems like Americans say we need government to intervene to help us with this pandemic, to help get this economy restarted, and to help us with the high cost of health care.
Now, another thing that Republicans are worried about is what happens to the Supreme Court. In the first 100 days, the president has put forward a commission to study possibly expanding the court as an overall reform idea. Other Democrats in Congress have already said we want 4 more justices on the court. Do you think that has any chance of going forward here?
No. But again, this is an idea that's been pushed by people who felt that they were burned by what happened with the current Attorney General Merrick Garland when he was nominated for a Supreme Court seat by former President Obama.
Right.
And that nomination was blocked by Republicans in the Senate. And then here comes President Trump, and he gets 3, I repeat, 3 nominations successfully placed on the court. The liberals, the Democrats and the liberals all felt, you know what, we just got run over, and this court is now unbalanced. For Biden's political aims, he wants to make sure that the left is heard. But I don't think, to come back to my point, I don't think you're going to see the Supreme Court expanded, not in my lifetime.
The president made a big deal in his inauguration speech about unity and bringing people together. And Republicans, and you've heard this over and over, have said in his first 100 days that the president really hasn't strived for unity. He's had a couple of meetings here and there, but he's not really listening to Republican proposals. What is your reaction to that?
Well, it's interesting. I will cite a Fox News poll. The poll asked, is Biden doing enough to reach out to Republicans? This is specifically your point, Dave. And the answer came back split. It was like 45% said, yes, he is doing enough, but 42% said, no, he's not doing enough. Well, the opposite question was also asked. Are Republicans doing enough to reach out to President Biden? Here, there was no split. Overwhelmingly, people said, 50+%, Republicans aren't doing enough to reach out and make an effort to work with President Biden. Only like 30% said, yeah, Republicans are doing enough.
What do you think, if anything, the president will say about the border issue? Because Republicans have been hammering away at this, calling it a crisis, and there has been a big surge of migrants coming here, and they've been saying that the vice president is not doing enough and all that. So what do you expect to hear tonight?
I expect that he's going to have to address this because that's a real problem. And it's a real problem for him, by the way, going back to the Fox News poll. That's his lowest rated area in terms of job performance. Overall, his job performance is like 54% positive. So, the American people are giving him something of a honeymoon, even in these politically polarized times. But on the issue of immigration, he is seen as failing, and people want solutions. So he's going to have to speak to this, and I imagine trying to put it in terms that are more favorable to him, he will contrast what he's doing to what President Trump did and talk about Trump separating children from their parents at the border, harsh policies and the like, and suggest that they were out of keeping with American values and the fact that we're a country of immigrants. So he's going to make those points. But he's also going to have to say and lay out, here's what I'm trying to do, and ask the American people for some time to get that problem solved.
Police reform, is that going to be an issue tonight as well?
I think so, because, again, that issue is so hot in the American mind right now in the aftermath of the George Floyd case in which Derek Chauvin, the police officer, was convicted, ongoing cases now, one in North Carolina and the like. I think he has great hope in Senator Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, a black man, Cory Booker, Senator, Democrat from New Jersey, also black, Congresswoman from California, Karen Bass. And the idea there is that if they can get a police reform bill written and get it passed, get some Republican support sufficient, more than 10 in the Senate to get it passed, that Biden will promise in his address to the Congress that he will sign that bill.
Senator Tim Scott is going to deliver the Republican rebuttal after the Biden speech. His profile has been raised in the last year or so. What do you think of Senator Scott, and do you think that maybe he might someday run for president?
I think that's in the cards. It's a very interesting dynamic. We are so polarized at the moment, and Scott, because he's an African American, because he's from the South, really has an opportunity to change not only the Republican look, but the Republican agenda, to say we're interested in police reform. But Republicans trust him. It could be a bridge that allows Republicans to have some success. They were already having some success, increasing their support among minorities in the country.
So in the end, in the first 100 days, has it gone the way you expected for President Biden?
It's better. I think that we are in extremely polarized times. Before he was inaugurated, we had that January 6th riot, insurrection, trouble at the Capitol, and all indications are most Republicans still believe that the election was stolen. It's incredible. And, so I thought Joe Biden is coming into stormy waters and he's going to get storm-tossed. But he has stayed on his agenda. He's made it clear he's about helping the American economy grow. He's been empathetic to Americans who have been contending with the pandemic. He's not been on Twitter. He's not been given to rants and rage. And by contrast to President Trump, really presents as a more, quote, normal, unquote, type of person that you can simply trust at the helm.
Juan Williams, co-host of The Five, thanks again for joining us.
Dave, my pleasure. Good to be with you.
New from the Fox News Podcasts Network.
My name is Kennedy, and welcome to my podcast, which will, I humbly say, single-handedly save the world. You're welcome.
It's Kennedy Saves the World. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Jason Chaffetz.
What's on your mind?
As the 100-day mark of the Biden-Harris administration approaches, the White House leadership team is beginning to look like Obama czars version 3.0. Just as President Obama got around the messy transparency of Senate confirmation by creating dozens of nebulous but powerful leadership roles, this administration is loading up with unconfirmable subpar appointees, some with financial ties to the industries they regulate. It's bad enough that Biden's energy secretary, Jennifer Granholm, has financial interests in a green energy company being promoted by Biden and Harris last week. Granholm did go through Senate confirmation where she committed to resign from the board of electric battery and vehicle maker Proterra and sell her stock. She has done neither, according to reporting from the New York Post. It gets worse with more casual appointments that receive less scrutiny. A host of questionable candidates have been appointed to take over responsibilities once reserved for cabinet secretaries. At least one of these czars is pushing the ethical limits by not providing financial disclosures or signing publicly available ethics pledges. Avi Garbo is essentially running the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, as senior counselor to the EPA administrator. Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican of Tennessee, asked to review his financial disclosure and ethics documents, hoping to better understand any potential conflicts. But if those documents exist, the EPA is refusing to disclose them. Garbo is presumably working closely with Gina McCarthy. She is the failed former administrator of the EPA under President Obama. But she has returned to the Biden-Harris administration as the White House climate coordinator. After her catastrophic failures surrounding Flint, Michigan water and the Gold King mine disaster, it's hard to imagine a scenario where she could pass Senate confirmation, even with the low bar Democrats have set. The current administration understands this, so they simply placed her into czar status, again ignoring the United States Senate. Former Secretary of State and U.S. Senator John Kerry has returned after jetting around the world. According to NPR, he serves now in the newly created position of Presidential Climate Envoy. From this perch, he advocates for massive reductions in energy use from his private jet, which is estimated to emit up to 40 times more carbon per passenger than commercial flights. Again, no Senate confirmation. It seems this current Senate controlled by Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, and his lemming Democrats have no problem with conflicts of interest or outright hypocrisy, as long as it's on their side. Obama-Biden learned how to avoid the Congress and the traditional press. Now the same players are back in different roles, but more secretive than ever. The power center of policy making right now is not the Senate confirmed and media vetted cabinet secretaries, but the murkier senior leadership positions created to bypass that process. This is former Congressman Jason Chaffetz. You can find my podcast, Jason in the House, at foxnewspodcast.com.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. From the Fox News Podcasts Network, subscribe and listen to the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Former federal prosecutor and 4-term U.S. Congressman from South Carolina brings you a one-of-a-kind podcast. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.